will join. So, hi everyone, a very warm welcome to today's panel discussion on the topic of global mobility strategies. My name is Birgit. I have been supporting customers at Localize, our beautiful host today, for the past 2 years in navigating these complex landscapes of global mobility, the challenges that come with it, and everything around that. And for today, we have a few interesting people here, a few interesting topics on the list. I'm super excited. I want to start with a number. I'm a big fan of statistics, I have to admit. And when I saw that number, I was pretty amazed. So according to a collection of statistics sourced by Forbes, 54% of employees today say they would change jobs for one that offered them more flexibility. 54%, which I think is pretty much. So more flexibility in terms of the working setup or in terms of location. So we see already it's a big factor. Many people in companies, I think, were of the opinion that COVID was just a very exceptional time, but I think we all know now that times have really changed and employers have to react to it. That is why today we brought together our esteemed panel of experts to shed some light on this topic of global mobility strategies. We will explore how businesses incorporate workcations, team meetups, offsites, business trips, all these things to help drive employee experiences, to improve employee retention, and also foster collaboration across teams. We will also open the floor to the audience later on and discuss any questions, comments, concerns you may have, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, I want to start actually with one quote that really stuck in my head from that Forbes report, which was, "I'll invest in you if you'll invest in me." And I thought that's such a perfect description of how our employee world nowadays works. Our parents might be of a different opinion, but I think nowadays that's really it. So I would like to see today how you as employer can make that investment to keep your employees and especially to keep them happy. So with that, I would like to give the floor to our lovely panelists. A very warm welcome to the three of you. Thanks so much for being here. And if you don't mind, I would love to hear a few introductory words from each of you. Could you quickly tell us about your current position and perhaps also what are the key challenges that your organization faces when it comes to managing international teams? Perhaps Sally, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I am Sally Flaxman, and I'm the head of global mobility at Remote. Come from a background of finance and international operations and HR, and have now put my focus into global mobility. I think one of our biggest challenges with Remote, as you know, we've got to look after our clients as well as our internal employees, and right to work compliance is one of our biggest challenges. You know, ensuring that everyone we hire has the right to work. And that's me.
You put it in a very beautiful nutshell, but we all know there's a lot more behind that. Thank you, Sally.
Of course.
And can you quickly tell us, you are currently operating in hybrid, remote, or in-office setup?
So our internal employees, we are all remote. At Remote, we don't have offices anywhere globally. And then, of course, our clients, their employees are pretty much either hybrid or remote.
Got it. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Giuseppe, you want to go next?
Thanks, Berit, and good to be here. I find this really, really exciting. Quick story about myself. Originally Italian, coming from a background of management consulting and investor, currently co-founder at smartway.work. While I've been noticing that AI was there to automate a lot of stuff, I realized that the only thing that could not be automated was getting together as human beings. Therefore, co-founded Smartway, that is a platform to organize and simplify the organization of team offsite, embracing this new way of working that we have seen coming after COVID. Therefore, helping company to make sure that culture sticks together.
Nice, thank you. And Giuseppe, you and your team, are you currently operating in a hybrid, remote, or in office setup?
We are fully remote, like role modeling what we believe is the right way of working. So absolutely fully remote.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you very much. And then Christina.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So I am in a unique position. I have a organization. Again, my name is Christina Urrutia. I'm the executive director for Women of Global Mobility. And I started in global mobility 15 plus years ago and realized that there was a space in mobility where women weren't being supported. And in their current roles, they were not being moved up the executive ladder or chosen for assignments. So that's why I created Women of Global Mobility. I've been doing it for about 1.5 years now, and I'm also an independent consultant. So I have no employees, but I do work with a lot of people in organizations who are sending their assignees on these big adventures, and hopefully inspiring them to support them with programs like Smart Way and remote as well, and localized, of course, too.
Thank you. And Christina, you work remotely from Mexico. Make us all
That's
jealous
correct.
over
Yep.
here. Nice. Thank you very much. Cool. Thank you very much. We are super excited to have you here today. Now we know a bit more about you three, but we also want to get a bit of a feeling for our audience. So we will run a very quick audience poll that should pop up on your window right now. Yeah, so if everyone could vote, that would be great. So we have as many opinions as possible. I think we as panelists can't vote. I just wanted to, but it didn't allow me to. That's all right.
I also tried. Will not make it.
Okay, but we will see the results in a second. Let's see, I'm excited. And also, I think for all of us, yeah, it's quite obvious that we are on the, yes, we've already offered this, or we are on the workcation side or whatever. Though, Sally, you also said that, for instance, your team has never met, which is also really interesting. So here we go. So we have a 60% response rate of yes, they have always offered meetups, offsites, workations. 21% yes, they've just started, and 19% no, or I don't know. Interesting. So we see a lot of companies, at least the ones being present here today, do work on their global mobility strategy, and they do offer some of these benefits for employees. And I think it's not only benefits for employees, but also for the company. Yeah, and now we've heard a lot already on the term global mobility strategy. However, perhaps some people are not even aware. Sally, can you tell us in a few words, perhaps, what the concept of a global mobility strategy actually is?
Sure, no problem. So, of course, your global mobility strategy is going to be different for every company that there is, because everyone has a different way of working. But what it does do is allows companies to access talent and knowledge and resources worldwide. So, you know, it might involve sending your employees to different places for different projects, business trips, but it will allow you to tap into resources all over the world. And, you know, it's really good for a company to start looking at it and offering it as a benefit for their employees, because that, as we've talked about today, is going to help you to retain your talent.
Nice. Thank you, Sally. Christina, what would you say? What are some of the key benefits, but also challenges associated with implementing such a global mobility strategy?
I don't think everything that Sally just said is absolutely true, right? Like, it gives you, the benefits are, it gives you the global talent access. Your employees are getting a more expanded worldview. I think at the beginning you had mentioned something about people feeling empowered or feeling as if their employer is investing in them. So there's a lot of benefits to implementing it. I would say for me, what I found from clients that I work with is the biggest challenge is managing expectations and really setting out what a global assignment means. It sounds so great on paper whenever they offer you, we're going to send you for 2 years in Spain, you're going to learn a new language, you're going to have all of these resources. And then what usually happens is the employer only takes care of the employee or employee plus one, but there's so many working pieces, right? So managing those expectations for your internal employee, but also taking care of the family piece of it so that the assignment succeeds, so you get a return on investment, right? Because you're not doing this just for fun, you're doing this as a business decision to support your business unit and the employee's growth so that you can retain the talent. And if you have a sad family, guess what? Your assignee is going to fail, or they're going to be miserable and they're going to leave to go somewhere else. And now you've not only invested all of this time and money into it, but you're also losing that talent.
Got it. I think at Localize, our favorite term is actually expectation management. I don't know how many times today I say it. So I think in everything, in many branches, it's the same, but I feel in global mobility, especially because the field is a bit new still, and people, they hear from, I don't know, who was it again? Was it Spotify or someone? Who in COVID times did that crazy thing of allowing anyone to work from anywhere. I think it was one of the big players, and everyone came to their employees and were like, why don't you allow that? So I think there's also a lot flying around, and it's so difficult to manage these expectations then if they are already set so high. Airbnb it was, thanks Michali. Yeah, that could be one of the big players. I just remembered that. So as we've seen also in the poll now from our audience, companies are slowly starting to incorporate mobility into their business practices as we face that new world, as Giuseppe, you also mentioned already. To all three of you, can you provide any specific tactics or programs that you know of that companies do to boost teamwork, to boost efficiency for international teams while starting to include mobility into their operations? Perhaps from your own company, perhaps from others. Is there any insights you can share?
I'll try to take a stab, and happy to see where Sally and Christina can complement to it. I do believe, and I like to always to say that while this concept of global mobility can, be perceived as full freedom, I think it comes with a lot of discipline from a business leader. I think even running a company that has full global mobility requires significant structure, policies, and let's say way of working that are relatively strict. So I do think that companies are rewiring towards setting, for example, a recurrent getting together, a recurrent, let's say, cross-fertilization across teams. That doesn't mean necessarily going for an offsite, but that also means like getting people together in an office or in a specific region to make sure that they don't lose track of what is the full culture. They don't lose track of, let's say, the knowledge sharing, and they create like a full unified way of working across teams. That comes with a clear structure top down. So I think global mobility in my mind means also discipline in the new way of working, and it's not just leaving everything to a full free interpretation.
It's a very good point. So perhaps, Sally, can you share some of the best practices for managing international teams and operations in that hybrid remote work environment? Giuseppe has just touched upon that. It's not all about just letting employees do whatever they want to, but of course there also needs to be some policy, some structure behind it.
Yeah, so I manage a team that's global, basically, so we have a 24/7 coverage for our clients. So having, what is the word for it? You need to have faith that your team are independent and are able to work remotely. It's really important to give them ownership and know and trust in the fact that they will work how they need to work. For me, you know, it's giving, you've got different cultures when you're working with a global team, and respecting everyone's cultures and how they work is important. We do offer a lot of flexibility in our work hours at Remote. It's something that one of our, you know, our company values is, you know, allowing people to work when it suits them, you know, and of course it has to align with the company, of course, and what needs to be done in your work. But we have regular check-ins. We have communications through software like Slack, where you've got open channels for people to discuss. And then we have social meetups on a Friday, you know, where it would either be to play games, virtual reality, you know, there are ways, cook-offs, you know, it's a great way for people to interact where it's not just work, when you are actually, where you would normally meet up and have a coffee chat in the office. We have coffee chats where people just set up a coffee chat, 10 minutes with someone that they don't normally work with. So, you know, to get to know the rest of the company. It's a great way to do it.
I agree with that. We've done some things in some of the roles that I've been in where the last company I worked alongside, they actually had a challenge for like programming, right? Like you would come up with the newest idea for what we were going to build. And they set us aside, each of the people in the company was assigned to a developer, and we got to do a side-by-side, like, this is our mock-up, this is what we're doing. And it was really a fun challenge, right? But it allowed us to work with somebody that we would normally not work with. And it also gave us the opportunity to ask questions, to learn something about like the side for development versus like I was in sales. So very different mindset, very different like competing ideas. And our team had never met before. So getting to have that one-on-one time. I've also seen, you know, companies schedule for fun, right? And like what Sally was saying, having those times to do a cook-off or things like that. I would just caution that when you're doing those things, the most important thing is making it flexible and not mandatory. Because as soon as you make it a mandatory, like you have to participate in the chili cook-off on this day, you're now excluding people who can't participate. And it's automatically making them feel like they're not a part of the culture.
I agree. Sorry, Giuseppe. Recording meetings in every time zone, so important. And alternating when you have your meetings so that everyone in every time zone feels included. And it's not just maybe APAC that are watching recordings continually, you know, adjusting your hours to feel so that the rest of your team feels supported in every time zone is really important.
And I think building on this is also documenting everything that is happening. I think there is an incredible switch needed from being in the office. And I know this being only a subset of the full global mobility, but with the scattered layout of people, I think we lose to a certain extent what was just by sitting in the office and listening what was happening. And we take for granted that everybody is aware of what is happening. So I think GitLab has been role modeling in running a remote organization. And I think documenting everything is at the basis of making sure that there is no leakage of information and everybody is able to access what has been said, what has been decided. And I think that comes also from recording meeting. Most likely some AI tools will make this even easier coming forward in the future.
True. Totally agree with all that has been said. Now you were a bit more on the positive side. Can you also think of some challenges, concerns that you might have encountered when implementing that? Because of course, I guess we are all aware it's not as easy as this.
I think, so building on this, I think it's really difficult to build memories together. I think there is an emotional journey which we all went through. I mean, I come from consulting, and I think the full model of being a consultant has been built in spending like, let's say 50 hours together as a team in remote places. And I think that came with like a blessing of building memories together and reducing misunderstanding. I think in a remote setup, or let's say in a scattered setup, there is a significant challenge on making sure that we all speak the same language, we understanding each other beyond the pure meaning of the words. I think there is an emotional way that usually it's actually the most important one that is difficult to build behind the screen. So I'm also like a believer that memories are meant to reduce misunderstanding between colleagues, and that's not easy.
I would say that one of the bigger challenges that I've seen was building that momentum. Whenever you first start out, you have this great idea. You're like, I'm going to implement a culture club. I'm going to do this. And it starts out great, right? Like maybe your team decides we're going to do a book club, whatever it is. But keeping the momentum, because it takes time to build that library and that sense of belonging, that sense of community. Even if you break out the team into smaller pieces, keeping it regularly on the schedule, whenever it's something that doesn't apply directly to your business unit, when you get an inbox full of emails on a Monday and you have culture club scheduled for a Monday, like you're setting yourself up for success if you don't do that. Because if you're going to have it where you have to cancel the meeting every week or every other week, you're not doing the work that you're setting out to do. So I think really just having it on the schedule, but setting yourself for success, really thinking about where does this belong in our days and when will we get the most value, where all of us can check out of work and say, this is what we're focused on, because it is important for your internal culture, right? You want this, it's not just about the business unit, it is the culture that keeps the team together.
Yeah. For me, I do believe that meeting in person at least once or twice is really important for building the trust. We have found that employees that might have been on workcations have met up because they happen to be in the same country as one of our teammates. And I can see already the bond that formed between those employees because they had met in person, socialized. It's body language. So I do think if you can get your teams together, even if it's just once to meet up, because it definitely builds a trust. It's more fun for the teams. And it's a good perk. It's a great perk because your team will feel like you investing in them. Exactly what we were saying. If you're prepared to invest in them and send them off on a workcation to what you just did in Tuscany, I mean, they're going to be super proud of your company and want to stay and work for this company because they're getting the fun as well as the work.
Totally. Giuseppe, from your perspective, now that you've switched careers into that more face-to-face interaction business kind of, what would you say from your perspective? Sally has touched upon some of these things. What are the benefits? And also, how can companies ensure these meetings, these face-to-face interactions are really meaningful and productive and not just people coming together, having a beer, going home again, and not being motivated by it?
It's a really good question. I think there is, let's say, a layer of benefit of the face-to-face that comes by just spending time discussing topics off the agenda. So I think there are a lot of things that, if we have a meeting together on Zoom, then I think we will jump on the meeting, discuss what we need to do and being as effective as we can and move on. But I think there is a layer of topic that's where, idea comes from. I always remember this beautiful example of an experiment done in a laboratory. They put camera to see where the best idea comes from, and the best idea would come from the coffee machine. Now, believe it or not, it's where people will get together and discuss and come up with new things, and then they will get back to the lab and try out what will work or not. So I think the face-to-face part is actually to promote this creativity, this sharing beyond the topics on the agenda. But as you were saying, that requires a bit of structure as well. I think an organization of a face-to-face meeting is also a bit of a job per se, because it requires guidance in creating the right environment for people to feel the freedom to share and to discuss and come up with new things. So I think even organizing this face-to-face meeting requires a bit of, knowledge and at least commitment from the company. And that's what we believe, with SmartWay, we have been working around to support company to make this happen.
And I can definitely share some localized insights. It was a great offsite last week. Not to advertise too much, but with SmartWay, we had an amazing offsite last week. So I definitely feel the benefit of these face-to-face interactions. I feel people are energized again. But perhaps, Christina, for you a question, how can you make sure that these meetings are really inclusive and accessible to everyone? Because also for us, not everyone can always join. Some have newborns at home. What can you do to make sure that people really feel everyone is included?
I think that the very first thing that any organization should be doing is at the very beginning of when you're hiring somebody, really understanding who you're hiring, right? There's so many of these measures that you can take, these surveys or whatever, but understanding your employee population. For people at Localize, maybe an offsite in Tuscany worked, right? Would that work for my company in the US? Maybe not, right? Maybe it's cost prohibitive for a lot of people, even if the company's covering that. Remember, there's other things that your employees are doing, especially for your women population. Like you said, a newborn baby. Whenever I had my son, I could not just fleet off to a happy hour at 5 p.m. I had to get home. I had to prepare dinner. I didn't have the support system. So whenever you're creating these events, thinking about all of the population that you're inviting, if you're doing for a small team, do you have young moms on the team? Do they need support to make sure that someone's watching after their child so that they can fully engage? Because the last thing you want is an employee to come to this event, be there because they feel they should be there because they want to be visible, they want the management to see them, and then to be constantly thinking in the back of their head, I have all of these things that I'm missing out on. My inbox is too full. Have you given them someone to relieve them for their work support? Or have you accepted that no one's doing work and you've vocalized that? So I think those are some of the ways that you can focus on keeping the employees engaged and really focusing them on the task at hand, which is to build those relationships and have it written out in policy. This is part of our team, right? Our team believes that these meetups are important for the development of you personally, right? Always focus on the employee first, but also as a team, this is how we grow. And when it's part of the team culture, it becomes part of the bigger culture picture too.
Really love those insights. Also, I feel at least something that we at Localize try to do is then break up into smaller teams, because not everyone might make it to the big offsite once or twice per year, but then at least ensure there are alternatives so that more people can join, and perhaps you can make it more local for those who are somehow not able to travel or don't want to travel, whatever, that you organize some things on the site basically. If we now come to the, yeah, totally. If we now look more at the less I don't want to say fun things, but because that's not true, but more privately organized things. I'm looking at workcations. So for anyone who doesn't know, workcation, combination of the word work and vacation, it's usually initiated by the employee. So they want to take some kind of trip for personal reasons. However, they don't only want to take that time off. They don't only want to go on vacation, but they might also want to work from there without taking paid time off. So coming back to that Forbes report I quoted in the beginning, I also want to share that actually 74% of employees who work from home say they'd consider taking a vacation, 74%. So there's definitely massive interest. And now I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are some benefits, but also challenges you think can arise with implementing these vacations?
Well, for me, it's whether the countries they're going to allows them to remotely work, because not every country can you just go and work remotely from there for an indefinite amount of time. So this is something that companies need to factor in the dates that the people are going to be away. Does that country require some form of visa to be able to work there, whether it's on a client site, in an Airbnb? Every single country has their own restrictions, and you can't just freely travel and work wherever you want to work. And that for us is implementing the strategy to make sure we're tracking every single one of our employees and approving them to work or not work while they are on vacation.
I guess there is but I'm not an expert about this. I'm actually curious to hear what you think. There is a topic about insurance. What do you cover when it comes to insurance in terms of covering the employee? I think there is boundaries around the time zone. I mean, how do I make sure that while giving the freedom and the opportunity to be on a workation, you don't end up in New Zealand and then basically being on the opposite time zone, and therefore holding back the team? And then overall, is the team, the way of working of the team, ready to embrace one of the team member being on a workation? Because I think that's not necessarily a switch that happens from day to night. So I think it's a bit of a mindset change of the full organization per se.
Totally. Super.
I would say that we have to think about the duty of care as well. Your employee says, I'm going to go work in Morocco for however long, a week, right? But if something were to happen during that time period with their physical health, or if something happened where they're robbed and their things are missing now, who is responsible? And to what level will your company get involved? If there's an act of natural disaster in that area, what will your company do to support them in an evacuation situation? If they lose their passport and they don't know what to do, what level are you going to step in? And making that very clear that while they are on this workcation, they are assuming full responsibility. Or if your company really wants to step it up, then saying like, we will assume, like, we have this policy in place for workcations. This is the X dollar amount that we can offer you for evacuation assistance or whatever it is. But really making sure you have that plan in place and having a signature on the line saying that the employee is doing this at their own will. Because if it comes back, well, I was working in this location, that could have ramifications for you on the back end.
Totally. Very good point. A lot of implications involved. And yeah, coming back to that Airbnb example in COVID times, it's not just, yes, people go work from anywhere. You can do that, but you might have to consider all the legal tax implications, all of that. So one closing question to you three. What do you envision the most popular model of global mobility being in 5 to 10 years? Perhaps one word, perhaps 2, 3 words. What do you think, Sally?
You mean remote working, or?
Yeah, is it going to be hybrid with regular meetups? Is it going to be remote only? Are we going back to on-site? What do you think?
For me, I think remote working is going to become the norm.
Yeah.
And might be with meetups, but cost is always going to be a factor. Inclusivity is going to be a factor, and I think that's why a lot of big companies don't organize too many meetups, because some people may be left out, exactly what we were talking about earlier. But for me, I feel remote working is going to be the way of the future.
Okay, Giuseppe, what do you think?
I agree. I think I would like to say, we always say remote work, but in real life. So making sure that we embrace remote working with some rules to make sure that we are inclusive and we build friendship beyond just being colleagues. That I think in a life where we are supposed to spend 60% of our, if not more, time working, I think it's good to make sure that we also enjoy that part of life. So I would say remote, but in real life.
Got it. Christina.
I'm going to go the opposite direction. I think the reality is it's going to be hybrid. I think that there's too many business decisions that we're placing on the employees' shoulders. And while it would be fantastic, like I'm a remote employee, I love being remote. I do believe that organizations are going to want to see their employees. I think they're going to require it at least on a quarterly basis when possible. And I think that we'll see a lot in global mobility. I think that we're going to see a lot of employees being moved closer to headquarters to ensure that they are able to do these. So as an industry, I think we're going to see a lot of moving and requiring employees to be within a certain radius of headquarters or a local regional.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much. So we will now open the floor to the audience for any questions, comments, feedback. You can add any of that in the Q&A section that you will see below. We already have one question coming up. So as an American who recently acquired EU citizenship by descent, what value do you see in companies offering to cover the costs associated with this? From a global mobility perspective, how much value do you personally put on dual multiple citizenship? Any reaction to that?
Covering the cost of global mobility when it is the choice of the employee or a personal thing is something that companies would have to, have a lot of discussion about, because it might not be inclusive of for everyone. If your company covers the cost for, say, one person, and then the other person says, well, I need this work permit, and they say, well, we're not going to cover the cost for that because that's your choice. It's a difficult one on whether your company offers it as a perk or as a benefit, but not all companies are covering that right now if it's personal, unless the company need the person to be moved to that country.
Yeah. I also find it interesting, Christina, what you've mentioned before in the beginning, understanding what's important to your employees. And perhaps you can also have a policy that might be a bit more flexible depending on the employee situation. And for some, for instance, that dual citizenship might be a deal breaker. For others, it's more the meet up in person. That's like the one thing they need. So I find that, super interesting.
Like I'm about to have dual citizenship. Actually, probably by this time next year, I'll be a dual citizen, Mexico and the US. And my whole family is, right? Our whole family are dual citizens, either by immigration or whichever. And for me, it opens up, like, whenever you're pairing, especially like the US with a lesser passport holder, if you will, like for Mexico, for example, I have access through my Mexican passport that I wouldn't have access to in the US. I just switch passports. I'm a resident and citizen of Mexico. So that means that Cuba is now open. If I need to go on an assignment, I work for a US company, I need to be on an assignment in Cuba for some reason, I would have access to do that using my dual passport. It's a selling feature. I personally think of it, especially if you're bilingual and you pair it with that dual citizenship, I think it could be really valuable for companies.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, we have a question coming in that is kind of related to that. What advice would you give to companies who are having to be cost conscious in order to still support business travel programs? Because of course, we know that many companies at the moment are in a bit of a shaky position, let's say it that way. So what advice would you give there if you have to be very much focused on pricing, on costs?
It's always a tricky question. I think I like to think that there is a way to run those programs in a cost efficient. I think also looking at my past experience, the business travel per se has been always anchored on a concept of sometimes fancy or, like fancy hotels or whatever. I think there is a way to run these programs in cheaper and eventually even more social impact, or let's say sustainable way. I think is also required, and I close the loop here, setting the right expectation, managing and setting the right expectation. So as we started this call, I think that is also the most important part when it comes to be cost efficient, but I believe that this can be done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think that anything needs to be over the top or lavish. Of course, you're going to see these people who go on these great trips with their teams, but really just having that time to be together. It could be something as simple as sharing a dinner together whenever you're all in the home location, or if everyone's required to travel for a conference. Whenever you're at the conference, set up a night before and go to dinner, go bowling, go do something local if you're all local. If you're not local, what I would recommend, something that I really enjoyed at my last company was we did an online escape room. And you can just type it into Google, you type in online escape room, and they have these things where you set up a team, you pay, it's a small dollar amount to pay into this, and your team gets to try to get out of the escape room. You have to find the answers and figure it out. There's tons of online communities like that. You guys could use your, if you have a gaming team, for example, you could have a game night where everyone logs in, they share their user IDs, and they partner together and play a game of whatever game it is that you guys want to play, racing. I think our consoles allow us to do that. So I would start there if you don't have the budget for it, or starting a book club where everyone reads a book, suggests something, and just get together once a week and spend that time together with your team.
Yeah, we have a small budget that is given to every employee on a quarterly basis for social meetups. So there might be anyone else in the company who might live around you or be visiting, and it's to go out for dinner. It has to be used for social. And so it's exactly what you were saying. It's a small amount, but it's a great way for the team to still be able to meet up and have a meal or get together. But setting budgets for workations, I think, is important. If your department knows what their budget is, they will be able to plan and have a fixed amount instead of the lavish, as we're talking fancy hotels. Sometimes a more rustic, small villa for a small team might work out better. So, budgets are a great way to control spend for travel.
Okay. Thanks so much. Thank you very much. We are close to the end already. Thank you very much to our lovely panelists, but also to everyone who attended today. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, please reach out to us, reach out to the three of them. I think there was already some connection going on in the chat on workations. We'd love to see that. Yeah, wishing you a lovely rest of the week. I hope to see you all at the next event, and thanks for attending.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Berit, and thanks everyone. This was great to catch up.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Berit. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. Hope it was helpful for everyone. I'm
pretty sure you've been all really great in your interaction. Loved all of it. I think many interesting insights. Thank you. We'll follow up.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.